Here we see one of the disadvantages of very old kits. They often have ejector pin marks in weird places. Fitting them can be difficult. For me, the best way to tackle them is to cut strips of masking tape. Then I mask everything but the pin marks. I used my plastic cement and putty mixture to fill the ejector pin marks and allowed that to dry for one day. The major bit of sanding was done with the masking tape still on. After pulling off the tape, I used a very fine sanding stick to finish the job. Then I used an old toothbrush to scrub off all the dust that was left from sanding the parts. After that, it was simple to assemble the box. I show you these boxes because I'll do some extra detailing on them in this video. Here are a bedroll, a tarp and a duffel bag that I'll use as templates for some scratch build items. Cleaning them up properly can be tricky, especially the seam lines around the ropes because of the narrow crevices. I used this hook to scrape off the seam lines in those areas. Well, enough of that. Let's do some serious work now. First, let's take a look at these boxes and their handles. I built them many times out of the box, and you can achieve a nice result with some dry brushing and pin washing. If you want to use several of them on one vehicle, you'd find them to look too uniform and boring. The easiest way out is to change the handles. While the handles were still there, I used them as templates to shape new ones from 0.3mm copper wire. Then I cut 1mm strips of strong aluminum foil for the hinges. I used a chisel blade for my number 1 Swan Morton handle and shaped up the box's handles. You want to be careful and work slowly. A little sanding finished that part of the job. Then I used the tiniest bit of CA glue to position the new handles and added the aluminum hinges. Since the handles were made from copper wire, it was still possible to bend them into any desired position without breaking them. While showing these pics on one of my Google Plus communities, I was asked how I did the bolt heads. I didn't do any bolt heads, but nonetheless I wanted to answer the question because there is a simple way to do them. At least the illusion that there are bolt heads. These are the tools I used for this little intermezzo. A blunt injection needle I have left from a refill set for inkjet cartridges, the tube of an empty Rebel contactor bottle, and a cheap screwdriver I shaped with a file to get a very narrow and sharp tip. A piece of aluminum foil and some scrap styrene were used as samples. Doing the bolt heads is simple. Just press the tip into the desired place and rotate it carefully. I did this in a hurry and so I punched out one bolt instead of embossing it. The same goes for the bolt heads and the styrene. Working slowly and carefully would have shown a nicer result. And now for the screwdriver. You can use the tip to turn the bolt heads into screw heads. Again, if I had done it with a little more care, the result would have been better, but I think you get the picture. Of course you don't get real bolt heads, but with a little bit of highlighting and pin washing the effect can come quite close. If you don't want to buy aftermarket bolt heads, this could be one way to do them. The utility duffel bags still look nice, but if you want to use them on a tank, there's something that should be done before. The shape is okay as long as the bags stand on their bottom. Placing them on a tank requires some sanding to flatten the contact area. The original round shape wouldn't look right. For jobs like this, I've got a self-made tool that I use since time began. I glued a piece of wet sanding paper onto a board. To sand things evenly, I do it in an H shape, as you can see here. There are two duffel bags in the set, and I want to use both of them on my M7 Priest. That made it necessary to give one of them a different look. I shaved off the rope and changed the folds using a triangular and a round file. Then I used two pieces of rope I got from Babana to replace the original stuff. I'll talk about that rope later. There are quite a lot of ways to build these items from scratch, but I'll show you an old one. You may like it if you don't want to use putty or clay for it. I used tissue paper, plastic cement, my special mixture, pieces of rope and PVA glue. First thing to do is to determine the dimensions of the bedrolls. The Italeri ones are about 1.5 cm wide, so I cut one long matching strip of tissue paper. Even the 4 layers of paper will look too flat. I cut another long strip, but this one was 3 cm wide. I wrapped it around the first strip and cut 12 layers of paper. The cement and putty mixture doesn't work as glue here. It only keeps the inner strip in place and makes for the desired stiffness after curing. The same goes for the plastic cement. The paper will also be sealed, and because of that we'll need less paint. Time to tie some rope around the bedroll. This should be done while the glue is still wet, because the paper will be rock hard after the cement is cured. I used CA glue after I had knotted the rope. And here's the moment to talk about ropes. There are always some fibers sticking out that make it look odd, especially when you use CA glue. There's a better way to do it, and you'll see how it can be done in a neat fashion a little later. Here I ended up with a result I didn't like that much, and I tried to cut off these nasty fibers with a very good pair of scissors I bought off Amazon. Well, after all, I think the bedrolls and tarps won't look too bad once they're painted and weathered. I'll build some more for the M7, and you'll see them in my upcoming build log. The duffel bag was built almost the same way. This time I used PVA glue because I needed to really glue the tissue paper. I drilled one end of the duffel bag to a pointed tip and wrapped a single layer of tissue paper around it. Then I added the rope and pressed down the duffel bag lightly to get a flat area that can be glued to the M7's engine deck. I used some plastic cement and putty mixture to seal the paper. I'm not completely happy with the result, but I can still change it to look better. I wanted to build an open duffel bag that's standing on the ground next to the M7. An open duffel bag needs some items inside of it, and so I decided to use some towels and a pair of boots. There were a couple of legs in my scrap box, and I chose a pair with nice looking boots. After cleaning them up properly, I cut them off and drilled them out. I made two towels the way I made the bedrolls, but of course they are thinner. put one towel each into the boot shafts. One was bent sideways to avoid a uniform appearance. Usually boots are packed in a bag to prevent the clothes and what else might be in the duffel bag from getting dirty. I decided to build such a bag and I used a single layer of tissue paper and a piece of rope for that. The bag needed a bottom and I glued it to the soles of the boots. The bag itself was shaped in a way that it looked partially rolled down or collapsed because I wanted the boots to be visible. I almost forgot to glue this together, but thanks to the pics I saw it before it was too late. Time to build the open duffel bag. The Italeri duffel bags are 2.3 centimeters tall and have a diameter of 9 millimeters. These strips of 1 centimeter made 3 thick layers of tissue paper and were rolled up until I had the matching diameter. I used a single layer of tissue paper to wrap it around the roll. The lower edge was glued to the bottom of the roll. The upper edge was glued inwards to make a tunnel for the rope. Then I glued the seam of the duffel bag together, pulled it straight into a cylindrical shape and added a bottom. It became clear what I had already thought while building the duffel bag. The boots wouldn't fit in there. So I changed my plan and glued a ball of tissue paper on one side of the roll inside the duffel bag to get an uneven shape and let the empty half collapse. All that was left to do was to cut off the bottom's edges and glue the rope to the bag. Really? No, not at all. I wanted to add straps to all duffel bags because there was one on the real ones. A simple strap from the bottom to the top might have been enough, but I wanted adjustable straps and so I needed buckles. In the Berlin set Pioneer Tools racks and clamps there are 16 buckles that aren't needed to build the set. Since this isn't really a part of the scratch build straps, I'll show you another way to make buckles in a couple of minutes. Well, I had these and only needed 4 of them. There were also metal ends for the straps. Perfect! I cut strips from the lid of an exquisite cheese package. The lid has a very nice texture and it looks like canvas. The straps needed ice so I could attach them to the duffel bags. I made them from 0.3mm copper wire by shaping them around the tip of a pair of tweezers and twisting the ends with a pair of pliers. Then I drilled 0.5mm holes into the middle of the bottom and close to the top of the 4 duffel bags. The eyes were glued into place. Next step was gluing one end of each strap around the middle bar of the buckles. Then the second end was glued around the top eyes. I glued a second strap to the first strap, attached it to the bottom eyes and pulled it as tightly as possible. The loops are still distinguishable and that's exactly what I wanted to achieve. Last thing to do was gluing the metal ends into place. The white makeup pencil was very useful again. Not everybody will have PE buckles handy, so I built a standard strap completely from scratch. First thing to do is to cut a piece of 0.3mm copper wire. Hold one end tightly with the tweezers and bend the wire all the way around. Now release the pressure carefully, just enough to remove the wire. That's what you get after cutting off the end next to the middle bar. You could leave it as it is, but I squeezed the buckle with a pair of flat pliers. And here's the result. You don't need any glue for this buckle. After squeezing, the wire's ends are almost invisible. The middle bar isn't straight here, but that doesn't matter at all. It'll be covered with a strap. There you go. Strap glued around the middle bar and the loop is clearly visible. And the second strap pulled through the buckle. Here you see how I built one of 3 loops to hold the strap in place. I did the end of the second strap simply by folding it backwards. Time to attach the eyes to the strap. I made them the same way as those on the other belts, but this time I squeezed the eyes with the flat pliers. And now a couple of pics of the finished product. I want to show you 2 different ways of building cylinders that can be used as oil drums under a tarp. This is number 1. I had an empty permanent marker. The handle was an aluminum tube. I cut off the front end to remove the reservoir. Then I cleaned up the end with a half-round file. The tube was long enough to make 3 oil drums. For cutting aluminum tubes you can also use your razor saw. Aluminum is soft enough not to damage the saw if you work carefully and slowly. The drums needed bottoms and tops, so I cut the rough shape from 1mm plastic sheet. I used CA glue to attach them to the drums. After the glue had cured thoroughly, I sanded the plastic into the proper shape. You don't need to be too precise though, because the drums will be hidden underneath the tarp. To make the illusion complete, we can add 2 rings around the cylinder. One way to do it is with 0.6mm copper wire, as you can see here. The CA glue didn't want to stick to the paint on the tube, so I roughened it up with a sanding stick. And that's what the drum looks like after gluing the rings into place. Some dry fitting with all the drums. As you can see, I drilled just lightly into the top lids. I used a 1.5mm drill bit. And here's the second way to do the rings around the drums. You can use rubber thread like I did it, but you can also use thread or rope. Whatever you use for it will look okay, because we only need the rough shape. And now for an easier way to build oil drums. I used one of the aluminum cylinders to cut out round pieces of styrofoam. You can push them out of the cylinder with the end of a pen or pencil. The styrofoam is 9mm thick and I wanted to build 5 drums. I cut out 10 round pieces and glued 5 stacks of 2 each onto a larger piece of styrofoam. Then I cut out the styrofoam and shaped it accordingly to the cylinders. It doesn't have to look perfect. It only needs to look like the real thing. next thing to do was adding top lids from plastic sheet. We'll come back to the oil drums when I show you how I made the tarps. And now I'll show you how I build wooden boxes. It appears to be a lot of work, but it isn't. It didn't take as long as cleaning and sanding the styrene box I used as a template. Cleaning up resin boxes can take even longer, let alone all the precautions because of the danger when you work with resin. The ideal material to do this would have been veneer, but I only had some coffee stirrers handy. I measured the styrene box and cut pieces of the stirrers for all sides. 4 boards for top and bottom, 2 boards each for the sides. Then I split up the stirrers lengthwise and cut matching pieces as cross members. I used some scrap pieces as reinforcements for inside the box. Then I assembled the box like a styrene box. I used CA glue, but you can also use PVA glue. The next step is only necessary if you don't use veneer for the build. The coffee stirrers were too thick and needed to be sanded down to look realistic. That didn't take long, but you want to do this before you attach the cross members. Here you can see the difference between before and after sanding. All nice and smooth. Then I glued the cross members into place and sanded them down too. I added nails along these pencil lines later. Well, sort of. Most ammo crates have handles made from rope. I drilled matching holes for pieces of cotton thread I wanted to use. The rope's ends will disappear underneath wooden cross members, so I removed some wood next to the holes to accommodate the ropes. Ropes and boards glued into place and sanded down. I had a couple of plus model laser cut wooden boxes and they had tiny little holes to represent the nails. I liked that very much and I used this pinpointed hook to punch holes into the boards along the lines I had drawn. I think that looks nice and realistic, and that concluded the build of that box. You can build boxes of each size that way. You can even build ammo crates the way they looked. If you want to display open boxes, you can cancel the inside reinforcements. Building this box took me half an hour. Since I had all materials handy, it didn't cost me anything at all. In my opinion, it was worth the time I spent building it. Hiding the real wooden box I've just shown you under a top would be a waste. Hidden boxes can be built from pieces of styrofoam. You're absolutely free to build them in whichever size you want to. All you need is some styrofoam, PVA glue and some pieces of wood if you wish to add cross members like I did it here. Time to build these boxes? 5 minutes. Of course I didn't spend any money on materials. After building all the items that will be hidden under a top, it's time to take a look at how I did it. My usual way would have been to do it with tissue paper. Then I saw Robert's half-track with a couple of tarps and rags on. He used paper towels and I liked the idea very much. Paper towels are much stronger, but the ones I had were embossed all over and that would be strongly visible. I decided to add his to my method. I used paper towel for the bottom and tissue paper for the top layer. I put them onto a wet cloth first and then onto a dry cloth. I wrapped up the styrofoam oil drums in boxes first. The boxes were glued to the drums. The paper towel and tissue paper were still a little wet. That made it easier to shape them. I glued the paper on top of the oil drums and the front edge of the boxes using PVA glue. As you can see, I worked on a sheet of baking paper. To shape the top, I used diluted PVA glue and an old brush. I applied the glue from the top to the bottom. That way I got natural looking folds. The tissue paper covered the embossed paper towel just like I hoped it would. It also got very nice looking wrinkles while I applied the diluted PVA glue. The result looks better than it would have if I had only used tissue paper. I allowed the glue to cure for 1 day. Then I used a self-made wooden chisel to remove the piece of stowage carefully from the baking paper. That was no problem at all. A view of the bottom. And the finished product. And then it was time to wrap up the aluminum oil drums. This time I wanted to tie them up with a rope. That allows me to talk about a better way of using cotton or hemp threads. The main problem are the fibers that are usually sticking out. It isn't easy to remove them and they always look a bit sloppy. I put a piece of rope into some lukewarm water and waited till it was really wet. In the meantime, I attached the tarp. I did it the same way as I did it with the styrofoam items. And now for the thread. It was really wet when I took it out of the water. I used the brush to apply PVA glue to the thread. That way I glued all loose fibers back into place. Why didn't I think of that earlier? Then I tied up the standing oil drums and let the rope's ends hang loosely over the third drum. I spread a fair amount of diluted PVA glue over the tarp and rope. The layer of paper towel was strong enough to remain undamaged while I pulled the rope around the drums tightly. All I had to do after this piece was dry and taken off the baking paper was cleaning up the edges. I only built this piece here to show you how it can be done. I'm not sure if it will be used for a dio. The wrapped off styrofoam piece will be used on the Case US Army Tractor's trailer. There are many more items you can build from scratch easily. They only cost a little bit of time, but if you start doing this, you'll be amazed about the ideas that come to your mind and the solutions you'll find. I hope you liked the vid and maybe you'll try to build some stowage. It really isn't difficult and it's nothing a modeler couldn't do. A couple of basic tools and materials and off you go.
Keep it simple.